Who chooses the wrong table at lunch and ends up sitting across from the one man who could change everything? Madeline Pierce didn't mean to make a mistake. She was just a tired temp worker looking for a quiet seat at the annual company luncheon. But when she sat down at a reserved table, too embarrassed to move, the man beside her didn't seem to mind. They talked. They laughed. She had no idea he was the CEO of the entire company. What began as an awkward accident would unravel secrets, spark a transformation, and lead to the most unexpected connection of her life. Before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. The banquet hall buzzed with voices, heels clicking against marble floors, and the gentle clatter of silverware. Madeline Pierce stood awkwardly at the edge of the room, gripping her lanyard and disposable name tag like a lifeline. Her blouse was second-hand, ironed that morning, and still smelled faintly of lavender detergent. The company's annual appreciation luncheon was supposed to be casual and fun, but to her it felt like wandering into a party she wasn't invited to. She scanned the tables, hoping to find one that wasn't completely full. Most of the seats were marked with silver name cards she didn't dare touch. Departments she didn't belong to, people she'd never met, and managers who never even looked her way during her 3-month contract in the accounting department. Madeline clutched her tray tighter. The only empty seat she spotted was at a long table near the window, elegant floral centerpiece, real crystal glasses, and a view of the skyline. Definitely not for temps like her. But her feet moved before her brain caught up. A few heads turned and someone whispered something to a colleague. She was already sitting when she realized the name card in front of her read reserved. Her cheeks burned. Too late to back out now. The man sitting to her right looked up from his water glass. Dark hair, slightly tousled. White shirt, sleeves rolled once at the cuffs. No tie. His posture was relaxed, almost bored. He studied her for a moment, then gave a slight smile. "You're early," he said, voice low and calm. Madeline blinked. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I thought this table was open." He tilted his head slightly. "Looks like it is now." She swallowed hard. "I can move." "You don't have to." He nodded toward her tray. "You've already claimed your territory." That made her smile, small and reluctant. She glanced down at her plate, plain chicken, salad, no dessert, and suddenly felt silly for how careful she'd been not to take too much. "I think I sat at the wrong table," she mumbled. "Maybe you sat exactly where you were supposed to." She didn't answer. Her pulse had quickened, but not in a fearful way. His presence wasn't intimidating, just magnetic. Comforting somehow. He wasn't looking at her like she didn't belong. A waiter approached and set a wine glass down in front of her. She shook her head quickly. "Oh, I'm not with this group. It's fine," the man beside her said smoothly. "She's with me." Madeline stared at him. The waiter simply nodded and left. "I didn't mean to get you in trouble," she whispered. "You didn't," he said. "What's your name?" "Madeline." "I mean Maddie. People call me Maddie." He nodded, amused. "Nice to meet you, Maddie." "I'm Julian." She didn't recognize the name. Not then. They sat quietly for a moment as other guests continued chatting, servers moving in sync. The clinking of glasses, laughter from across the room, none of it touched the bubble that suddenly surrounded their part of the table. "You don't seem like you enjoy these things," Julian said, not looking at her. She blinked. "That obvious?" "Only to people who feel the same." Maddie let out a small, nervous laugh. "I'm just a temp. I wasn't even sure I was allowed to come. Do you want to stay?" "I guess I do now," she said before she could stop herself. He smiled again, this time with something softer behind it. Interest. Warmth. Curiosity. Her fingers fidgeted with the edge of her napkin. "What do you do?" Julian paused, as if weighing whether to answer honestly. "I handle strategy." "Oh." She nodded, trying to sound impressed. "Like marketing?" "Something like that." "Sorry," she said, embarrassed. "I'm not very good at corporate stuff. I just sort invoices and double-check vendor payments all day." "That sounds important." She laughed. "It's really not. Still." Someone has to keep things honest. Maddie glanced at him. And what about you? Do you like your job? I used to, he said quietly. Now I think I'm trying to remember why I started it in the first place. She wasn't sure how to respond. So she didn't. Just picked at her salad and let his words settle in the space between them. The next hour passed strangely quickly. They spoke about small things: travel, books, the terrible elevator music in their building. He asked about her neighborhood and she found herself telling him about her leaky faucet and how her upstairs neighbor's dog barks at cartoons. It was the most anyone had asked about her life in months. And then a woman with a headset approached their table. "Mr. Reeve," she said, "they're ready for your speech." Madeline's fork froze halfway to her mouth. The woman didn't even glance at her. She turned and left, assuming he'd follow. Julian stood, brushing invisible dust from his sleeves. "Duty calls." "Wait," Maddie's voice cracked. "Reeve? As in?" He looked down at her, expression unreadable now. "It was nice talking to you, Maddie." And with that he walked toward the stage. She watched in stunned silence as the room quieted, lights dimmed slightly, and someone announced him at the microphone. Julian Reeve, founder and CEO of Virion Technologies. Her boss, the man who signed every paycheck in this building. The one who had just spent lunch pretending to be a regular guest and letting her talk like she mattered. She felt her entire body sink into the chair. Her face burned. People at nearby tables were now glancing at her, clearly noticing the interaction. Had she said anything embarrassing? Had she been disrespectful? Or worse, had he been playing with her? Madeline didn't wait for dessert. She slipped out the side exit, her name tag still stuck crookedly to her chest, and ran toward the bus stop, her heart pounding louder than the city traffic. She didn't know what had just happened, but she knew one thing for sure. She just sat across from her boss, and she had no idea what came next. The bus ride home was a blur of streetlights and static. Madeline sat in the last row, her knees pressed together, hands clutching her phone like it could somehow rewind time. Her reflection in the window looked ghostly, wide eyes, flushed cheeks, disbelief still etched into her face. Around her, the city moved on. Unbothered, unaware. She replayed every word, every glance. The way he smiled when she mentioned the leaky faucet. The way he listened. That part hadn't been fake, had it? The announcement still echoed in her ears. Julian Reeve, CEO, and her, a temp worker who nearly spilled dressing on his tailored shirt. When the bus pulled into her neighborhood, she didn't move for a moment. Only when the driver shouted, "Last stop," did she hurry out into the cold. Her apartment was as she left it, dim, small, lived in. She dropped her bag on the couch and sank down beside it, arms folded over her chest. The silence felt too loud. She turned on the TV for background noise but couldn't focus. Her thoughts kept circling the same moment, the look in his eyes when he stood to leave. It hadn't been condescending. It had almost been apologetic. Her phone buzzed. A message from a number she didn't recognize. "Unknown, I hope you got home safe. I didn't get to say goodbye properly." Madeline stared at the screen. Her thumb hovered. She didn't respond. Couldn't. Not yet. The next morning at work, everything felt sharper. Every stapler click, every copier beep, every polite nod from full-time employees who still didn't know her name. Maddie kept her head down, answering emails and sorting spreadsheets like nothing had changed. But everything had. By noon, rumors had already started. "I heard someone sat with Julian during the luncheon." "Who?" "Dunno." "Some intern? Maybe a contractor." She just walked away mid-event. He didn't look mad, though. Just thoughtful. Madeline kept typing, her fingers slightly shaking. She skipped lunch and hid in the break room at 2, sipping from a paper cup of burnt coffee. She thought she was alone until a soft voice made her jump. "You're Maddie, right?" She turned. A tall woman with a kind face and neatly braided hair stood in the doorway, holding a folder. Her badge read Danica HR. "I'm sorry," Maddie said quickly. "Am I not supposed to be in here?" Danica waved her off. "Relax. Just wanted to introduce myself. You've been with us, what, 12 weeks? 13, Maddie said quietly. Danica smiled. Julian mentioned you. The cup in Maddie's hand tipped slightly. He what? He didn't say much. Just that he met someone at the luncheon who didn't realize who he was and that it was the most honest conversation he's had all year. Maddie's mouth went dry. Danica handed her the folder. There's a position opening up in creative. Junior coordinator. It's a step up from temping. I thought you might want to apply. I don't have a design degree, Maddie stammered. I only studied for a year before. Your file said you took night classes in layout and color theory. She blinked. You read my file? Danica shrugged. Julian asked for it. That afternoon, Madeline sat at her desk staring at the folder like it might explode. Part of her wanted to hide under it. The other part, the quieter, braver voice, whispered that maybe she was allowed to want more. She submitted the application. And didn't tell anyone. 2 days later, she was called to the 32nd floor. The elevator ride felt eternal. She smoothed her skirt with clammy palms and wished she'd worn different shoes. Or brushed her hair again. Or had time to run. When the doors opened, she stepped into a minimalist lobby with floor-to-ceiling windows and a receptionist who barely looked up before waving her toward the last office. Go right in. He's expecting you. The door was ajar. She knocked once and entered. Julian stood at the window, back turned, hands in his pockets. He wore a dark navy button-down, open at the collar, no jacket. Just like before. He didn't turn. I was beginning to think you wouldn't apply. Madeline swallowed. I wasn't sure if it was real. Or if it was a test. He turned then, and his face was unreadable, serious, quiet, searching. It wasn't a test. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. You didn't say anything, she said. At the luncheon. You let me talk like I didn't know. I liked that you didn't know, he admitted. For 10 minutes, I was just a man sitting beside you. Not a CEO. Not a name on a plaque. Just someone, listening. She looked away. I felt stupid afterward. You weren't. And now everyone's talking about it. Julian moved closer, but not too close. They'll talk either way. I care more about what you want to do. I don't know, she said softly. I've always been background. Then maybe it's time you stepped forward. He held out a document, not a contract, not yet. Just a sample project brief. She took it with trembling fingers. This isn't charity, he added. I've seen your ideas. You're good. She blinked. You've read my drafts? I asked IT to pull your sandbox folder. The unused design samples you never submitted. You've got an eye for emotional storytelling. Her throat tightened. Julian hesitated. You don't have to say yes. You can walk out, pretend the luncheon never happened, stay where it's safe. She looked up at him, really looked. No, she whispered. I think I'm done hiding. A pause. He smiled slowly. Good. When she left the office, her steps were lighter. The city outside didn't look so gray. She didn't know exactly where this was going, whether it was a job, a mistake, or something stranger, but for the first time in a long time, she felt seen. And that changed everything. If you're still here, you're amazing. Hit like if you love true stories, it helps us keep going. The creative department looked nothing like the floor she'd come from. Instead of cubicles, there were open workspaces lined with whiteboards and concept sketches. Music played softly from someone's speaker, and a mural of abstract cityscapes stretched across one wall. People wore headphones, sneakers, statement glasses, and no one stared when she walked in. Her new desk was small but near a window with a view of a nearby park and just enough sunlight to warm the corner. There was already a post-it stuck to her screen. Welcome to the circus. We're glad you joined the chaos. A. Madeline smiled. She didn't know who A was, but it helped. Danica from HR had given her a quick tour, followed by a rundown of the current project, a campaign for a nonprofit partner focused on literacy programs. Maddie's first task was helping with visual mood boards and content flow for a digital ad. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard longer than she liked. Old doubts tried to creep in. What if she wasn't good enough? What if she messed it up and proved everyone right? But then she remembered Julian's voice in that office. You've got an eye for emotional storytelling. So she clicked open the folder and started building. By the end of the day, she'd stayed past 6, not because anyone asked her to, but because she didn't want to leave. When she finally packed up, the hallway lights were already dimming. The elevator dinged softly as it opened, and she stepped inside alone. Just as the doors started to close, a hand reached in and the doors slid back open. Julian stepped in. She froze. He didn't speak right away. Just nodded, eyes calm, sleeves rolled. Long day? She nodded. I didn't realize the time. That's a good sign. They stood side by side, not touching, the hum of the elevator filling the silence between floors. I saw your mock-ups, he said after a beat. The empathy angle using the child's point of view. It's strong. Her heart stuttered. You weren't supposed to be reviewing them already. I asked for access, he said simply. I like knowing who I'm investing in. You make it sound like a gamble. He turned toward her slightly. Everything worth building is. She didn't answer. Couldn't. Not when her brain was still catching up to the idea that he was reading her drafts at all. When the elevator reached the ground floor, she stepped out first. He followed. Are you heading home? He asked. She nodded. Train. I can offer a ride, he said. No pressure. Madeline hesitated. The streetlights were already blinking on outside, and her bag felt heavier than usual. She almost said no. But something about the way he stood, not pushing, just waiting, made her say yes. His car was quiet, dark interior, not flashy. He didn't play music. Just drove. For the first few blocks, they didn't speak. Then he asked, Did you enjoy today? I didn't get fired, so I'll take it as a win. He smirked. That's a low bar. I'm used to low bars. Julian glanced at her briefly. You shouldn't be. She looked out the window. You don't have to keep encouraging me, you know. I got the job. I'm not doing it because of the job. Her heart skipped again. She kept her gaze on the blurred city outside. You're quiet tonight, he said. I'm not sure what the rules are. For conversation? For this. A pause. There are no rules, he said gently. Not between us. Not if we're honest. But what are we? She asked before she could stop herself. He pulled to a soft stop at a light and looked at her. Two people figuring it out, he said. That's allowed. When they reached her apartment, he didn't get out, didn't push. Just looked at her once more. Good night, Maddie. Good night, she whispered. That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the echo of his voice still in her ears. There are no rules. But she knew that wasn't true. There were always rules. Especially for girls like her. Still, the next morning she found a coffee on her desk, simple, just the way she liked it. No note. No name. But she knew. And when she looked out across the office toward the far end where the executives lived behind glass, she caught the faintest glance from Julian through a gap in the blinds. He didn't smile. But he didn't look away either. The weeks passed. She learned to stop second-guessing herself. Slowly, she started offering ideas in meetings, drawing up drafts without waiting for someone to ask. She stayed late not because she had to, but because her work felt like a reflection of something she hadn't let out in years. She still wasn't sure what Julian was to her. But sometimes their eyes would meet across the room, or in the elevator, or during brief check-ins, and the air between them would shift, something unsaid always flickering beneath the surface. One Thursday afternoon, a storm rolled in. Power flickered once. The building held. Meetings were canceled. People went home early. Maddie stayed. She liked the sound of rain on the windows. It muffled the world. She didn't hear him enter the room. Only noticed when he placed a small container on the corner of her desk. She looked up. What's this? Soup, he said. Danica said you didn't eat lunch. She blinked. You asked Danica about my lunch? I noticed things. She opened the lid slowly. It smelled like something from a memory, homemade, warm, safe. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, not accusing, just curious. He sat on the edge of her desk. "Because I like seeing you here. But it's complicated." "I know. I'm not," she stopped herself. Julian waited. "I'm not someone people choose," she finished softly. He didn't speak for a moment. Then, "You sat at my table." "I didn't mean to." "I'm glad you did." She held his gaze longer than she ever had. And for the first time, she didn't feel like the girl who didn't belong. It didn't take long for people to notice. At first, it was small. A few glances when she entered meetings, slightly longer pauses when Julian asked for her opinion in front of others. Then came the whispers in the elevators, the restrooms, the coffee lines. "She's the one from the luncheon, right? Did you hear she got a desk on the creative floor just days later? They say she's dating him." "No way. She's just a temp." She was. Madeline kept her head down. She worked harder, stayed longer, avoided elevators where she might have to stand next to someone whispering behind their phone. The warmth she'd felt in her first weeks began to curdle. People were polite. Too polite. One afternoon, she found her concept proposal returned with no comments, just a single word scribbled at the top in red ink: "Lucky." She stared at it for a full minute before slowly folding the page and placing it in the back of her drawer. Julian didn't mention the shift. Not directly. But he knew. She could tell in the way he started keeping more distance during office hours, how his emails became shorter, colder, carefully professional. He was protecting her. Or at least trying to. But it hurt anyway. Friday afternoon, she stepped out onto the rooftop garden for a moment of air. The city buzzed below, endless and uncaring. She leaned on the railing, watching traffic snake between buildings. "You should tell them," a voice said behind her. She didn't turn. "Tell them what?" "That you earned it." She exhaled. "Would they believe me?" Julian stepped beside her. "I would. You're not the one I have to convince." He ran a hand through his hair. "Do you want me to say something? I can shut it down." "No," she said quickly. "That'll just make it worse." Then it's the CEO came to her defense. "I'll never be taken seriously again." He looked at her, jaw tight. "This isn't fair," he said. She gave a short, bitter laugh. "Of course it's not fair. It's life." A pause. "I can't keep sneaking around the building like I'm a scandal," she added. "If this, whatever this is between us, if it's real, I need to know it's not going to collapse the second someone prints a rumor." Julian looked like he wanted to reach for her but didn't. "It is real," he said quietly. "But that doesn't mean it's not complicated." She nodded. "Then maybe we should stop." His breath caught. "Maddie, you said no rules. But the world doesn't work like that. Not for people like me." Before he could answer, she turned and walked back inside. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. Julian didn't text. Didn't call. She buried herself in a campaign redesign and tried to convince herself she was fine. That it was just a moment, not a connection. Just another mistake she should have known better than to make. Until Wednesday morning when Danica showed up at her desk. "Can we talk?" Madeline's stomach dropped. They went to a small side office. Danica closed the door gently. "I know this isn't what you want to hear," she began. "But we've received concerns." Maddie didn't speak. "Some are wondering about favoritism. About boundaries. About whether you've been given opportunities others didn't have." "I didn't ask for any of this," Maddie whispered. "I worked. I stayed late. I delivered." "I know. And so does Julian. But perception is a powerful thing. I didn't plan to sit at his table." Danica's expression softened. "No one thinks you did. But it's become a conversation now. And the board is paying attention." Madeline looked down at her hands. "I'm not asking you to resign," Danica added. "But it might be smart to step back from any public collaboration. At least for now." Maddie nodded once. Message received. She walked out of the room with her heart in her throat. Back at her desk, she opened her drawer, pulled out the page with the red "Lucky" written across the top and stared at it. Then she tore it in half. And again. And again. That night, she stayed until the office was dark. When she stepped outside, Julian was waiting near the back entrance, leaning against the stone pillar like he'd been there for a while. His coat was open, collar turned up against the wind, expression unreadable. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "I'm not here as the CEO." She crossed her arms. "Then why are you here?" "Because I made the mistake of thinking I could protect you by keeping my distance." She didn't reply. He stepped closer, voice lower. "But all I did was prove them right, that you were just a secret. That what we had wasn't worth standing beside." She shook her head. "You don't get to do this now." "I know. But I'm doing it anyway." She wanted to scream, to cry, to tell him she hated him for making her believe. But instead, she whispered, "What do you want, Julian?" "I want you." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. She took it with trembling fingers. Inside was a printed invitation. "Company Awards Gala, Saturday night. Table 1, Julian Reeve and guest." "I want you to come," he said. "Not as my assistant. Not as a temp. As someone I'm choosing, publicly, without apology." She stared at the card. "And if I say no?" "I'll still be there," he said. "But I'll be hoping every second that the elevator doors open and you walk in." Her voice was a whisper. "You're asking me to let them talk. I'm asking you to let them see." And then he was gone, leaving only the envelope in her hands. She almost didn't go. The dress was borrowed. Simple. Navy. A-line with short sleeves and a neckline that felt too open until she threw on a second-hand blazer. Her shoes were scuffed and her hands shook while she braided her hair and pinned it low. The gala was held at the Grand Avalon, marble pillars, string quartet, lights like soft gold poured across the ceiling. It wasn't the kind of place she'd ever imagined herself walking into. Not as a guest. Not like this. When the elevator opened, a man in a headset asked, "Name?" She hesitated. "Madeline Pierce." "You're on table 1, he said with a smile, already gesturing her through. Her heart thudded in her ears. The ballroom swelled with movement and elegance. Waiters glided with trays, laughter rang out like crystal, and light shimmered off floor-length gowns. Every part of her screamed wrong table, wrong room, wrong world. But then she saw him. Julian stood near the stage, speaking to someone in a dark suit. His sleeves were rolled again. No tie. Just like the first time. When he turned and saw her, his expression didn't change, not visibly, but something settled across his face. Like he'd been holding his breath until now. He didn't walk toward her. He waited for her to cross the room. And so she did. People turned. Whispered. Some she recognized from meetings. Others she didn't. But she kept walking until she reached him, chin lifted, hands steady. "You came," he said. "You invited me." "I meant what I wrote," he said quietly. "No hiding." She nodded. "I'm tired of hiding." They sat together at table 1, surrounded by board members and executives. No one said a word to her for the first 10 minutes. And then someone did. "Ms. Pierce," said a man to her left. "Your campaign for the literacy rollout, the concept was yours, yes?" Madeline blinked. "The team shaped it. But the original concept was mine." He gave a small nod. It resonated. "Nicely done." She glanced at Julian, who just kept looking forward like he'd known this would happen all along. The night moved in waves. Speeches, awards, applause. At one point, the lights dimmed and a video presentation began, highlights of the company's outreach projects. One of the clips featured a classroom library with a mural Maddie had sketched on a napkin and uploaded to the server as a joke. It had made it in. No one had told her. When the video ended, Julian stood and walked to the podium. He didn't read notes. Didn't list statistics. He spoke quietly, simply. This company was built on ideas. Some loud. Some quiet. Some from places we didn't expect. But every now and then an idea shows up that reminds you why you started. He looked across the room, straight at her. And the person behind that idea isn't always wearing the most expensive suit or sitting in the most obvious seat. Sometimes they're just someone who accidentally chooses the right table. A ripple of laughter moved through the room. Julian smiled. I'm grateful for mistakes like that. The applause that followed wasn't thunderous, but it was real. Afterward, as the music picked up and the lights softened, he found her near the back of the room, standing beside a tall window overlooking the city skyline. You meant that, she asked. Every word. I thought you weren't supposed to make things personal. I thought so too, he said. But then you sat down. She laughed under her breath. I was just trying not to be in anyone's way. He took a step closer. You've been in my way ever since. She looked up at him. And this time she didn't look away. He reached for her hand. Dance with me. I don't know how. Neither do I. They moved slowly, surrounded by people and candlelight and possibility. When the night ended, he didn't take her home in a car service. They walked. He carried her shoes when they started to rub her heels. She carried the folded program from the awards. On the corner by her apartment, under a flickering streetlight, she stopped. I don't want to be seen as the girl you pulled up, she said. You're not, he replied. You're the girl who stood up. A pause. And I'm the one who followed. She stepped in closer. So this is real? He nodded. And the rumors? Let them talk. They will. Then we'll make sure they say the right things. Madeline looked at him like she'd been waiting her whole life to be sure of something. And then, quietly, she kissed him. No fanfare. No spotlight. Just a streetlight, a warm night, and the sound of her heels swinging from his hand as she reached for the man who once sat beside her without saying a name. Later, when people asked how it began, he'd always smile and say, she sat at the wrong table. And she'd always answer, no, I finally sat where I belonged.